I was muted. Sorry. Hello and welcome everyone to the next fireside chat. My name is Anamut, blockchain lead at SCB10X, and we are joined here with Mr. Brian Transo, Metaverse lead at Polygon Studios. Brian, thank you so much for joining with us today.
Thank you
Brian,
for
I
having me.
think yeah, let's start with the first question. I believe like many or probably like all of us probably know like Polygon and have used it before, right? But I think Polygon Studios is a recent initiative here. Can you tell us a bit more about like what Polygon Studio is and then what are like your goals with the studio?
Sure. By way of analogy, I guess Polygon Studios is the secret weapon of Polygon when it comes to NFTs generally, understanding that to be collectibles and fine art, blockchain-based games, and open metaverse, that's to mean virtual worlds and protocols that are built thereupon. We are part incubator and investment arm. We seek opportunity to capture the upside of emerging Web3 tech that's building on Polygon Rails, of course, and then to act as producer in a biz dev capacity with some legacy IP holders who are looking to strategize around NFTs, games, and metaverse on Polygon.
Right, I see. So when you mention metaverse, right, I think like there's a few definitions like up in the social media and all that. Like what's your definition of metaverse in your view?
So my definition is Matthew Ball's definition. Matthew is an advisor to Polygon, some real giga-brain, big brain sort of stuff coming out of Matthew Ball over the years, just a fantastic mind and thinker in the space. So to recount some of his ideas, I would never take these as my own, of course. It's a more immersive version of the internet. It's the next evolution of the internet. That's to say, an immersive, persistent, synchronous reality online. And that will take shape in many different forms. But if you're to think, again, by way of analogy, that will reach maybe someday a Ready Player One type existence, that would be an accurate portrayal of the metaverse. And that's also to say it shouldn't be conflated with or confused to be simply AR and VR, right? I feel like the media often will do that, will conflate virtual reality with the metaverse, right? Virtual reality makes up a component of the metaverse, but it is not solely the metaverse.
Right, I see. So yeah, so you mentioned like immersive experience and AR, VR as part of it, right? And well, what are the rest then that are not like apart from the AR, VR and immersive experience part?
So one analogy that I do give that I will take some credit for, maybe someone coined it before me, but just it's the multiplayer internet, right? Currently, when you're online, it's not a persistent or synchronous experience. In some instances, we can get pretty close to it. In centralized worlds, particularly with MMO gaming, we get close to it, but it doesn't have the serendipity and the charm of the real world, whereby pretty much anything's possible, right? In the real world, if we wanted to, we could have 1 million people descend upon a specific area, and we can all be there persistently, synchronously, and the amount of charm and the amount of content, the UGC that we create within the real world, if you will, is never ending, right? So when you think about the metaverse, the amount of UGC, the amount of content that we're going to need to make it feel like the real world in any meaningful way, to make it an experience that people want to consistently and regularly be a part of and to build upon, the amount of content that we're going to need is going to be enormous.
Right, right. So it's almost like imagination is your only limit in what you can create or like experience in the metaverse. Right?
Yeah, I feel like we say that often for a lot of things, like, oh, our imagination is the only limitation. But in this instance, it truly feels like that is the case, right? So to hear you say that, it makes me smile because that can feel reductive, that can feel cliche. But in this instance, I do believe that that is very true.
Right, right. Yeah. So jumping on to about the blockchain, right? So metaverse and blockchain. What's your view on like the infrastructure layer of the metaverse?
Yeah, so that's the key component, right? Is to get to a place where we can be synchronous and persistent, to have the compute layer, to have the networking layer, to have the hardware layer. I mean, even VR, for instance, the frames per second of a VR headset that is needed, the technology that's needed to reduce or eliminate, nausea, right? I myself have a fairly weak constitution, and when I wear VR, I can only last a couple minutes before I feel a little queasy. We're years away from actually attaining these things. Edge computing. I'm a sort of a crypto anarchist and a firm believer in decentralization, and that we need an open, decentralized web. And we will need edge computing to allow for folks to actually experience a fully decentralized metaverse. Currently, most people who are building upon the metaverse, even the decentralized players, are either using, in the best case, IPFS, but in, you don't want to call it the worst case, right? Because everyone's trying, and we're rowing in the same direction. We're trying to get there. But a lot of these technologies are being built upon centralized servers, right? So therein lies this interesting and almost ironic paradox, right? Like we're rowing towards this decentralized future, but it's on centralized rails in some ways. Sorry, I kind of went off track a little bit there. I feel like I may not have answered your question. Maybe I answered it in part.
That's fine. That's good. That's good. Like you mentioned edge computing, right? Can you explain a bit more what does that mean?
Yeah, so it's the way that I look at that is cloud computing on steroids. The ability to get a tremendous amount of data onto machines in a very efficient way, such that one can operate a machine that's not $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 to actually be able to use the compute, to actually log into the network and use the technology. Currently, as it stands, most metaversal virtual worlds either require a client that you use that is not being sort of distributed to you through the cloud, or it's in the browser, but it's not a great experience. So edge computing will solve for that.
I see. So when you mentioned about the metaverse and blockchain, right? Do you think all metaverses should be on public blockchains, or are there cases where it doesn't have to be?
Yeah, it's interesting. You use the word metaverse plural. I take that Matthew Ball view that there is a single metaverse, and these virtual worlds make up the constellation or the galaxies within the metaverse. But it is actually, I do that often myself because it's just easy to call it a metaverse when you're casually having the conversation. But the question about whether it should all be on public blockchain, the purist in me says yes, right? Like that's what I would love to see. It's kind of funny. One could think, the end of Ready Player One, you have the Gunters fighting IOI, and it's this rebel squadron, these freedom fighters that are fighting for a decentralized web, which is what people in my social circle consider ourselves to be doing. And the most pure of us want that, and we believe that it's very necessary. However, we're also practical and reasonable, and we do understand that not every user of the metaverse, not every denizen who will live, persist, and engage with, whether that's through recreation or through professional activities or whatever, engage with the metaverse will want to do it in a decentralized way. Some of them will be okay with giving up their privacy to a centralized entity. Some will be okay with that trade-off. And I think we would be naive to believe that there won't be a future where there are a decentralized metaverse as well as a more centralized, let's call it a betaverse, to coin another word. And I think what's important is that these betaverses, to try to coin that word and really make it stick, that they play nicely with the decentralized web, right? I think it comes down to empowering the user and to make sure that they're getting the best experience as possible. So if a user is minting NFTs on a centralized ledger within a centralized betaverse, that user should be able, when the bridges are made, which is coming, and that's an eventuality, we don't have that just yet, but we'll be able to actually have sovereignty over these items and be able to port them over to an actual decentralized metaverse because they indeed do own those objects. So to summarize that, I would love to see a world where the entirety of the metaverse is built upon a decentralized ledger. I don't believe that to be the case, but I do think that centralized betaverses and decentralized metaverses will play nicely.
Right. So maybe a bit some time for you to like talk about Polygon, right? So from Polygon point of view, like the infrastructure itself, how is it compared to other chains in terms of like its readiness for metaverse?
Yeah, I would say Polygon is more ready than any of its competitive set. You know, the word competition in blockchain is a kind of a funny word because WAGMI, right? We're all going to make it. But you know, to use that word loosely, when you look at scaling, when you look at the amount of transactions per second that we're going to need to achieve to be able to actually have any semblance of a metaverse, that number is going to have to be, you know, exponentially larger than where we are today. It just so happens that Polygon's proof of stake chain is about as fast as any chain can be right now without giving up tremendous amounts of either security or decentralization, right? That whole Zuku's triangle theory of decentralization. But with that, the proof of stake side chain, we call it a commit chain because we post the balance of the ledger to the Ethereum blockchain, of which we derive our security therefrom. We are as fast as one can reasonably be at this time. What's most exciting for me about Polygon, though, is the way that we approach scalability from a 360-degree perspective. And that's to say, using that word competitors again, right, loosely and lovingly, that's to say where our competitors are choosing one avenue, and many of them are doing that one thing quite well, right? Whether that's optimistic rollups, ZK rollups, monolithic layer ones, you know, competitive side chains that may be a little bit more centralized. You know, so as to say that some of them are doing it very well, we're doing all of it, and we're excelling at all of it, right? So we have our battle-tested proof-of-stake side chain, our commit chain. You know, we acquired over $1 billion worth of ZK technologies last year, from Hermes to Maiden to Mer to Nightfall, which is an amazing partnership that we have with Ernst & Young. We're doing data availability solutions. And then there's also our SDK capabilities. Our Edge program, the name of the brand is Polygon Edge. Under Polygon Edge, any enterprise can spin up a blockchain within minutes. And you know that blockchain will decide, that enterprise will decide just how decentralized that chain will be, just how permissioned it will be. You know, it's not outside the realm of possibility to imagine that large enterprises, you know, conglomerates, multinationals may want to run their own validator set, and that they have the capital to be able to do that. And with Polygon, they can. And because we're modular, because we have so many solutions, each of these solutions can talk to each other and can interact with each other. So what's exciting to me is that it feels like Polygon is the only blockchain really that's addressing each of these scalability solutions.
Right. I think that's very interesting because I think when we see people building on metaverse, right, we see them, oh, we talk about gamings or NFTs and we plug it into the chain, put some visuals on it, and then that's it, right? But then, as you mentioned, there's, you know, all the scalability technologies are in play. There's also ZK, the zero knowledge technology that might be in use. There's business development and all that, right? It seems like you're already like kind of visionary, seeing that, oh, in order to like build the metaverse, all of those have to be taken into account. So that's very interesting to hear.
Yeah, and you know, on that note, taking it all into account, the concept of composability is so incredibly important with the metaverse, right? You know, we hear about composability when we think about DeFi, right? How these protocols talk to each other. We call it money Legos. Something internally, and something I guess from this conversation, you could see I love to try to coin phrases to get it to really stick, right? Like sticky words that, you know, lay people, those who don't work in Web3 can really appreciate and start to understand. But a phrase that we like to use is culture Legos, right? We think about within the metaverse, you know, EVM compatibility, how important that is, you know, the amount of dApps that are being built upon Polygon, how they all interact with each other within the metaverse, right? You go into Decentraland, you go into Sandbox, you go into Somnium, Mona, Spatial, all of these incredible metaversal virtual worlds that are building upon Polygon. And everything that's happening within the EVM, specifically everything that's happening on Polygon, is there, right? So if you're a developer and you're building something really cool within the metaverse, whether that's in Decentraland or Sandbox or wherever, you can interact with all of these decentralized applications that are bringing such tremendous network effects and such amazing flywheel to Polygon. So that's something I think that doesn't get discussed enough. Composability is something that infrastructure people, social good people, and particularly DeFi people like to talk about. But I think it's something that metaverse people need to talk about a little bit more.
Right, right. Sounds good. So jumping onto like the use case a bit more, I think we talked about the infrastructure level quite a bit now. What are like some of the recent developments that you think like are pretty cool, pretty interesting? I see like Polygon invested or supported many projects like ArtFi, Meta Engine. Do you have any specific projects or any specific category you want to mention?
Yeah, I love the infrastructure plays. I love people that are addressing interoperability. Metamundo, in my mind, is one of the leaders there. Their Meta Portal, which they released a couple weeks ago, really sort of far ahead of a lot of people in terms of actually bringing real, meaningful interoperability and standards, design standards, data standards to the blockchain for the metaverse. So I'm quite interested in infrastructure plays. With that, composable infrastructure plays, right? Something that's been heating up is sort of the NPC battle in the metaverse. A lot of AI solutions, chatbots, smart NPCs that will populate the metaverse. So imagine going to a retail environment within the metaverse, and it's a staff of really cool NPCs. Maybe some of them are fluff world guys, maybe some of them are punks, some of them are apes, and they're dressed up in Prada if they're at the Prada store. And their smart brain, powered by someone like an Alter State Machine, which is a fantastic player in the space, doing amazing things. Altered State Machine powers these NPCs, and they can actually interact with you in a charming way. They actually understand the product. They can actually talk about what's inside this virtual store. So all that's quite interesting to me. And then another area of the metaverse that I find very interesting are these smaller scale virtual worlds that are meant to be more like galleries. So instead of these massive virtual worlds that are meant to be for recreation, that are meant for discovery and exploration, the Monas of the world, the Spatials of the world, the OnCybers of the world, that are building smaller areas that are meant to kind of compete with social media is the way that I look at it, right? It's more of like a immersive Twitter Spaces that has NFTs and digitally scarce resources within those worlds. People can showcase their taste level. They can showcase what influences them, what inspires them in a really cool setting. And it really kind of competes with social media. So I quite like that trend that's been emerging lately.
Right, that's interesting. Like you mentioned standards and also social media coming on chain. I think like recent development was Aave, right? They introduced a protocol that has all the kind of like interfaces for kind of social interactions on chain. So it would be interesting to see like what's coming up next. I'm going to go off track a bit, like asking you about, since you mentioned standards, any standards in mind that you think that will be the kind of like the crucial standards in the metaverse? I say compared to like in DeFi, you have like ERC20 or 721, right? So is there any kind of like standards that you think that would help like grow the metaverse a lot?
That's a great question. I haven't sat down and like really thought of that. So I don't have a good canned answer for you, something that I've talked about that's fully fleshed out. But something that has been emerging with a few players in the space that I've been talking to, MetaZone, they're a fantastic protocol that's built mostly upon Decentraland right now, but they're growing in other ways. They talk about this quite a lot, and that's developing a standard for actually creating virtual worlds. So they want to own it from the seed, right? They want to develop the standard that allows anyone to create a virtual world that can interact with any other virtual world. Now, I'm a non-technical person who has a decent technical aptitude, so the concept is interesting to me. How that actually works, I'm not the guy to answer that. But that one was quite interesting. So you might have to reach out to the guys at MetaZone to talk to them because they're onto something. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting, interesting. I think I kind of like look at Sandbox, and I guess like we are kind of like everyone is thinking, oh, we can jump between lands, right? But we are kind of like looking for ways in how do we actually interact with other worlds outside of Sandbox. So I think that that would be interesting to see the standard coming up and see how that plays in the industry.
Yeah, on that note, and again, because I'm non-technical, I can only dream and imagine. I can't tell you how it could ever be done. But I think that's what captivated everyone's emotion with the Loot project, right? That a couple of words could somehow become items someday, right? So I imagine a world where you can take those items of loot, put them into a smart contract, and somehow the smart contract interacts with AI and spits out the divine robe in whatever aesthetic and file type it needs to be to exist within Sandbox, Decentraland, Mona, pick a virtual or a world that hasn't been created yet. Again, that's a macro level thought. That's a concept. I don't know in practice and in theory how doable that is, and if it is doable, how long it'll take to actually happen. But that's exciting. That's interesting.
Yeah, I agree. So let's jump a bit onto Prada, right? You mentioned fashion, and I think like you also mentioned back in Decrypt at ETH Denver about being bullish on fashion in Metaverse. Like, can you explain a bit more about that?
Yeah, so I'll take it back to like my own crypto pilling, if you will, back in 2017 when I took the plunge and went down the rabbit hole. And Ethereum captivated me from the jump in early Q1 2017. By Q4, when CryptoKitties came out, that really is what took my imagination and put it into hyperdrive. And I was doing trend forecasting at the time. I come from the world of fashion, and I started slipping into my presentations to multinationals, images of CryptoKitties and tried to explain to them the importance of digital scarcity. So this is a concept I've been thinking about for years. And you just look at the cosmetics business within MMOs, within any sort of video game, really. And the last time I checked, we were over $60 billion a year in cosmetic items that ironically users don't own, right? It's a license to use. You don't actually own it. And in my mind, once you let the genie out of the bottle and NFTs within games, these digitally scarce items within games, I just believe that the cosmetics, the actual clothing, the costumes will eventually just dwarf the actual apparel economy. I really, really do believe that. I just look at my own habits. I look at my nieces and nephews' habits. We're fast approaching spending as much money within the metaverse on cosmetics as we do in the real world. Now, we might be ahead of the curve. We might be a little crazy even to be doing that. But, gamers are usually ahead of the curve, and trends that bubble up in gaming usually end up captivating the rest of the world, as we saw during COVID. So to me, it's a logical conclusion that we get to a place where there are more digitally scarce items than real items that are fashion related, apparel related.
Cool. Okay, so we have 5 minutes left. I guess I want to talk a bit about bringing in like builders and like all the projects into Polygon Studios, right? What kind of projects are you looking for to invest or partner with?
Yeah, so the verticals that we have set up, I said it at the top of this interview, was NFTs as fine art and collectibles, blockchain games, and metaverse. Blockchain games is just so important, right? The AAA studios, the interesting indie studios, they're all researching the space quite heavily. They're all trying to figure out how and when they're going to get involved. And I would imagine most people who work in this space would pick games to be the big honeypot, right? That's what's going to onboard the next 100 million and then eventually the next billion wallets. So that is a tremendous focal point. Polygon Studios, Polygon proper, having hired Ryan Fwiz Watt from YouTube Gaming as the CEO of Polygon Studios is a big is a big move, right? It's planting the flag and saying we're here to play with the traditional developers and studios and to evangelize to them the importance of blockchain games. So yeah, that's how I feel about that.
Right. And how do people, how should they reach out to you if they're interested?
Oh man, I'm everywhere. Twitter, Telegram, LinkedIn, carrier pigeon. However you could get in touch. No, but Twitter's always a good place.
Mhm.
I really do try to stay active on Twitter, and I stay in my DMs as long as it's not spam, as long as it's not self-serving, if it's authentic and real, and it's inquisitive and thought-provoking and fun, I'll engage. So if anyone wants to reach out, please do. Crack a joke, maybe that might get my attention. But yeah, Twitter's a good place.
Cool. Right. So I guess like maybe last question from me. In terms of like, so there are people who already form teams, right? And they have ideas and concepts and they can reach out to you. I guess there are so many more people are interested and they have like really strong vertical skills, right? They might be good in art. They might be good in development. They might be good in business. What's your advice if they wanna reach out or like come into the metaverse, build things out here? Either in the metaverse or work with Polygon Studios. Do you have any advice for these individuals?
Learn by doing, wrestle with it, struggle with it. The most beautiful thing about crypto, Web3, NFTs is that it's permissionless. You know, just jump right in. My own experience, I think, is a testament to that. I don't come from gaming, having been a gamer my entire life, maybe, but I've never worked in gaming. I looked at this business with a different lens. I largely taught myself everything I know about blockchain and sort of joined DAOs and participated in Reddits and wrestled with DeFi, read white papers, minted NFTs, bought NFTs, got rugged. Just getting in there and embracing the permissionless nature of it, embracing the incredible spirit and friendliness of people who work in Web3, people who evangelize Web3, just community members, make friends, and just keep running. Stay curious. That's what I would say.
Perfect. That's perfect. Okay, well, thank you so much, Brian. I think like it was a very interesting discussion. I love your energy and I love your spirit of decentralization. Really happy to talk to you today. Anyone who wants to reach out, make sure to reach out to Brian Transo on Twitter or also visit Polygon Studios as well. Thank you for your time today. Hope to talk again soon.
Thank you.